Shabbat Shalom, friends. Thank you for being here with us this morning. It's really wonderful to have you. There is an old saying that those of you who know me know that I don't really care for all that much. It goes something like, man plans and God laughs. And there are different versions of it. But I have a tendency to turn that on its head and say that it is God who plans and men who laugh, going off down another path, thinking that the teachings in this wonderful book and in these scrolls somehow don't really apply to us. And yet, we have some instances in our amazing Torah scroll of God having a little fun at humanity's expense. Oh, how we could use Rabbi Sachs with us now. But he points out 3 instances in our Torah where he imagined God laughing. Usually, from the vantage point of heaven, the ultimate absurdity is when humans start thinking of themselves as gods. In the Tower of Babel, going all the way back to Genesis, men were gathering in the plains and decided to build a city and a tower that would reach to the heavens. There's archaeological confirmation of Mesopotamian ziggurats, including the Temple of Marduk in Babylon, that were found with inscriptions saying this tower reaches to the heavens. The Mesopotamian city-states were among the first places of civilization, one of the turning points in the history of human life on Earth. These buildings on monumental scales, the ziggurats in Babylon, the pyramids of Egypt, they were built on flat land and towered over their surroundings. The Great Pyramid of Giza, built even before Abraham was born, was so monumental that it remained the tallest man-made structure on Earth for thousands of years. These artificial mountains built by human hands suggested to the builders that humans had acquired godlike powers. They had built a literal stairway to heaven. But the significance of the phrase back in Genesis of the Torah's account of the tower, and God came down to see the city and the tower which the children of man had built, to Rabbi Sachs, this was an example of God laughing. On earth, humans thought they had reached the sky, but to God, the building was so infinitesimal, so microscopic, that God had to come down even to see it. With the invention of flight, we know now how small the tallest buildings look when you are looking even down from a mere 30,000 feet. Of course, to have a little fun with the people, God confused their language. They couldn't understand what one person was saying to the next. He imagined a foreman calling for a brick, being handed a hammer, telling a worker to go right, and he went left. Their language resulted in a foundering of the project to be reduced to a welter of incomprehension. Men thought they could climb to heaven, but in the end, they couldn't even understand what the person next to them was saying. The next example that Rabbi Sachs offered was during the early plagues, jumping forward now to Exodus. Moses and Aaron turned the water of the Nile into blood and filled Egypt with frogs. And then the Egyptian magicians did the same to show that they had the same power. You know, the real magic would have been to turn the blood back into water and to not make more frogs appear, but to disappear. But instead, Pharaoh's magicians just made things worse, not better. They were so concerned to do what the Hebrews could do. We can listen to divine laughter in the 3rd plague. Lice. Oof. For the first time, the magicians tried and could not replicate the effect. Defeated, they turned to Pharaoh and said, "This is the finger of God." The Egyptians built such symbols of power, monumental architecture, pyramids, temples, palaces, and statues on massive scales. But God showed them God's power by way of the tiniest of insects, painful, yet almost invisible to the eye. Hubris became nemesis. When people think they're big, our scripture tells us that God shows them they are small. And vice versa. Those who think themselves small, supremely so, Moses, they become truly great. We leap ahead to the book of Numbers in this week's Parsha, the curious episode of Bilam's talking donkey, the inspiration for Eddie Murphy's character in Shrek. We think of donkeys as having almost a laughing sound, right? Their hee-haw sounds like poking a finger and having a laugh at people's expenses. We know that donkeys are not well treated in our world. They are so often beasts of burden, and they are wonderful creatures who deserve our support and care and love. In this Parsha, Bilam and Balak imagine themselves to be gods. This suggestion of the importance of an ancient holy man was a person who had access to supernatural powers. The thought from King Balak was that Balaam had the power to curse and to bless. But the Torah's view is the opposite. Really, only God can bless and curse, not human beings. God had said to Abraham, "I will bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you." It's a strange story, admittedly. It's told in a fable-like way, and after the donkey is the only one who can actually see what is going on, this so-called seer finally has his eyes opened after striking the donkey, and she opens her mouth and calls him out on his terrible behavior. This was a man reputed to be a maestro of supernatural forces. We thought that he had the power to bless or curse whom he chose, but he didn't at all. He was merely a vessel. At the time, God using the technology available to pour into Bilam's mouth the blessings that after such difficult chapters in our Torah, take a look back over the last few, they have a few moments of rest. They may be hurting inside, but the blessings that come from Bilam's mouth are a salve, soothing words to cool the troubled spirits of the Israelites. Bilam attempted over and over, with Balak's frustration, clapping his hands together and practically hopping up and down. They tried so hard to curse the Israelites. And the more they attempted to curse them, the more they were blessed. This we have to apply over the course of Jewish history. The Parsha ends on a pretty difficult scene. We are human, and we have great failings, and the Torah doesn't shy away from that. But this attempt to curse the Jewish people is as true today and as alive today as it was then. When we read about this manic, undeterrable for so long attempt to destroy the Jewish people through words, how can we not sit up and take notice? Thinking about Bilam with his nefarious intentions, the question of his intentions are quite fascinating, but Balak certainly has one intention. This guy who's a king has nothing better to do with his time than to curse the Jews. I kept thinking about it these last few days to this morning and kept me up at night. Here we have this extraordinary technology, this artificial not-so-intelligence that suddenly is really with us everywhere. You'll notice it's the first friend that comes up on any search on your computer or phone. You get your AI companion. Some of it's pretty darn good. But when it's misused, we end up with the shanda of Mr. Musk having nothing better to do with his time, it seems, than prevent filters that would have resulted in his AI companion, this grok horror, spewing anti-Semitic diatribes, simply because it seems to me that it was a little bored. And we know from this parsha that when people get bored and they get a little scared and they get far too much power, King Balak, it seems inevitable that in about 2.5 seconds, they end up cursing the Jews. It's enough to make your head spin. How we would prefer that the technology that is so available would somehow in our dreams have been turned into good. That all of the garbage that was poured into Grok and similar platforms would have somehow miraculously spat out something decent, something okay to hear. Anything along the lines of Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov, Mishkenotecha Yisrael. How fair are your tents, O Jacob, your dwelling places, O Israel. We can dream, but we don't live in a time of that kind of miracle. But the Jewish people still hopes. We have a hope that will not die. And when Bilam is finally forced to say, how can I curse those whom God has not cursed? And how can I denounce those whom the Lord has not denounced? We are reminded, Mr. Musk and everything he stands for, notwithstanding, that hubris always eventually becomes nemesis. Build a tower to the sky, or build a taller tower. You see the front of today's Chronicle? Something taller than Salesforce is coming? Will we not learn? Higher and higher. And yet, our airplanes will still fly higher, and the Spirit of God will be higher still. In a world in which rulers then and now engage in endless projects of self-aggrandizement, only Israel produces a work of literature in which they attribute their success to God and their failures to themselves. Far from making us weak, this has made us extraordinarily strong. By looking ourselves square in the face and thinking about times when God laughs, we can instead leave today thinking about times that God smiles. And we have a threefold prescription for ways to make God smile. At the end of our Haftarah today, Micah, chapter 6, verse 8, the people have been running around in the previous verses saying, how shall I make God happy? Shall I come with burnt offerings, with year-old calves? Would God like thousands of rams and myriads of streams of oil, my firstborn for my sins, the fruit of my body for my transgression? No, says Micah. He's told you what's good and what God requires of you. Only to act justly, to love mercy, and to walk modestly with your God. Justice has yet to be realized in our world. Goodness and mercy seem so far away, but we can each do small acts of kindness and goodness. And walking modestly and humbly, with a sense of the Holy One within and beside us, that is what makes God smile. Can each of you take one action or make a kind word that could live with this prescription, this direction for behavior? Leave off our projects of self-aggrandizement and stairways to heaven, and instead build pathways to justice and mercy and goodness and modesty and humility? I know we can. The Torah knows we can. That is the way to make God smile. Let us commit ourselves to it, friends, and know that this great literature that looks us honestly in the face and authentically in the soul is here to help us turn to that path. Do justly, love mercy, and let us walk humbly together. Shabbat shalom.